So our conference today is a series of panels and mini lectures punctuated with stakeholders speaking up and some legislators weighing in. We'll close with an open discussion about building a statewide agenda that harmonizes preservation and the environment. So again, I'm doing my part here by setting the stage. So why are we here? I think we're here because we all recognize the urgent existential threat of climate change and because we know we have to work together to do something about it. Too often at the local, state, and national levels, preservationists and environmentalists are working at cross purposes. Even worse, we are depicted in the media as being enemies. As recently as this week, there was a story in the Washington Post about preservation commissioners across the country clutching their pearls as they reject unsightly solar panels on aesthetic grounds. But there is a growing group of people trying to harmonize the agendas of preservationists and environmentalists. It should be easy because these groups have a lot in common. Both oppose the waste of materials associated with needless demolition. Both herald the energy efficiency inherent in buildings built before, let's say, the 1940s. And all agree that resiliency and disaster planning are essential to protecting our most distinctive neighborhoods. But it hasn't been easy. For the most part, we've relied on local governments to weigh preservation and environmental values. Across the country, we leave it to individual zoning commissions, historic review boards, and building code officials to decide what's best for their town. Sometimes this works. For example, here in Hartford, I serve on the zoning commission, as Professor McDougall mentioned. We've used a form-based code to protect the character of our historic neighborhoods. And we've also made huge strides on the environmental side. For example, we allow solar panels in every district on every building. We require electric vehicle charging stations in new parking lots. We give density bonuses for green roofs, combined heat and power, and fuel cells. I just use this as an example to say Hartford has tried to express local preferences and respond to changing trends. But most local governments cannot change their rules as quickly and as radically as we have. So as much as we like local control, we also have to think about the role the state might play in addressing the climate crisis as it relates to our many existing buildings. In Connecticut, we've recognized that the state legislature can support, guide, and create a framework for meaningful change across localities. So one example relevant to our discussion today is a state law preventing local historic commissions from rejecting solar panel applications absent what amounts to a compelling reason. We're just one of a few states that does this. And so in this law, we've essentially said that we can't wait for every local government to change its rules. We've made it a state priority. I'll give you another example, something that Liz Shapiro mentioned, which is the Community Investment Act. And there we devote real estate fees, we dedicate those to open space and historic preservation, among other things. So our question for today is, what else can the state do to balance our history with our future? At its most basic level, states provide local governments with enabling authority to act in certain ways. So state legislators may choose to enable local governments to, for example, enact deconstruction ordinances that require the dismantling and recycling of building materials like Portland, Oregon does. State government has a financial function. Again, here, just by way of an example, we might enhance energy efficiency programs, which have been rated often at the expense of low-income homeowners. The state has a regulatory function too. It might stem demolition by neglect. You'll hear more about that in a later panel. It might stem demolition by neglect by requiring that property owners maintain historic structures. We might also create regional construction districts for our shoreline and riparian communities to have a more consistent approach to sea level rise across the current patchwork of jurisdictions. The state may fortify representation of preservationists in state emergency centers when natural disasters like hurricanes hit. So these are just ideas. You'll hear a lot of different ideas today about the role that the state can play. So we should remember throughout the day to challenge these ideas within the frame of equity and affordability. In having these conversations today, we are not alone. Preservationists everywhere are having similar discussions tailored to the jurisdiction. At the meeting of the National Trust for Historic Preservation advisors this year, just a few months ago, we heard from states like Nevada and Colorado, where preservationists are planning for wildfires, not sea level rise. There's been some great new work on this from academic institutions, including Columbia University's preservation program. And there's also an ongoing conversation about the federal government's role. For example, the third rail of preservation, perhaps, the obscure role called the Secretary Standards for the Interior of the Treatment of Historic Properties, which do not mention environment. We won't talk about that today. We're going to focus on states. So, as a preservationist, I recognize that we cannot forever trap buildings in amber. But there won't be anything to save if we don't have a planet left. At the same time, saving the environment is meaningless if we lose the culture that makes us human in the first place. Our historic communities are stronger when we ensure that our built environment gracefully evolves as the stage for human thriving and innovation. So today we're looking for innovations in the law as we push for a more sustainable future for our past. With that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Jenny Schofield. Where is she? Oh, there she is. Great. So we're so pleased again to have the State Historic Preservation Office as a partner in this event. Jenny's role there is the State and National Register Coordinator, and she'll be giving us our second mini lecture. And your slides are queued up.